been doing it for several years. So welcome everyone to Do I Really Need a Product Roadmap? If you want to go to the next one, Lucy. We're group presenting, sharing computers and audio and different things. So bear with us as we move through.
Did it not?
It hasn't advanced.
I done the wrong one.
That's okay. All right, we'll give it a second. So the three of us are from Foundry. We are an agency in Minneapolis and an office in New York. We work to design and build custom software. And we also, in doing so, we work on a lot of products. So that is a little bit about us. My name is Geri. I am the Chief Operating Officer here at Foundry, and I also lead the product side of things and have a background in working in software project management as well as leading product teams. So that's a little bit about me. How are you?
Awesome. Thanks everyone for joining us. My name is Seth. I'm the Director of Production here at Foundry. So my team, it's our job to make sure that we're always producing the right work on time and doing good work for our customers. And before I came to Foundry, I spent a lot of my career in product leadership in one way, shape, or form, mostly at very small companies. So this sort of road mapping exercise and what do I need to do and what's the best way to do it is something I've done a number of times through my career. So I'm happy to talk about it here today.
And I'm Lucy. I'm a product designer here at Foundry, which basically means that I get to do a lovely combination of user research and user experience design. So I get to really dig into the reason why we build what we do and who we're building it for and why we make the decisions that we make is all kind of boils back down to what our users want. Mm-hmm.
So today, sorry, there's like quite a bit of a delay, but it's good because then I get to see what you guys see. So today, what we're going to talk about is what the heck a roadmap is, making sure that we share the misconceptions that we've learned, maybe in some cases the hard way, walk through some basic information to talk about your product story, because a roadmap generally has context that's required. We want to talk about why you want to do this, and then share some different examples. And then finally, we're looking forward to connecting with you. So our goal is to get through this in about 30 minutes or so we can all hear from you. So we want to start off with what is a roadmap? There are many different definitions. So we picked one. And really the reason that we picked this one was that it spoke to the fact that it's an instrument and it's really used for communication and alignment, because that's really what it is, making sure that you can tell a story of your product's development and strategy over time and articulating your business goals. So it's not just a list of features. It really has to be aligned to what your business is doing. And finally, we liked this one because it talked about it. It specifically called out product managers, but for us, it's important to note that the people who are having the right discussions with this roadmap are product managers, but they're also leaders, they're founders, they're anyone who has to tell the story. It's super important that encompasses many different people, because we know that product managers mean a lot of different things in different settings. And the important part is that you're wearing the product hat and you will then use a roadmap. So we wanted to make sure that you understood what it's not, because there are, sometimes it's like a Gantt chart image. It's this release plan. It is, not committing to a very specific deadline. Oftentimes they have disclaimers on them saying that, we created it on this date and it's going to change because it's a living document. So it's really not meant to be these kind of specific rigid plans. Was there something you wanted to add? I felt like this was one spot.
No, I think this is good, but this is a little bit more thematic, I guess, for how I like to make my own roadmaps, is that not only is it not necessarily a commitment to a deadline, but all the best roadmaps I've seen in my career are also not necessarily very specifically focused feature commitments. Now, of course, you still have to tell people what you're going to make, you still have to tell people what you're going to do, but what tends to be more valuable is, and we'll talk about this further down the presentation, so I don't want to necessarily go too deep into the rabbit hole right now, but what tends to be more important is, especially when you're talking about your stakeholders, is committing to what you're going to realize with this product. So what is going to happen when people use your product? What are the problems you're going to help people solve? What's the value you're going to provide? Users don't really care about feature X, Y, Z. They care about what that feature allows them to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what the roadmap is what are you going to let people do? What problems are you going to solve? What value are you going to create?
Mm-hmm.
And again, we'll talk about that more down the line, but to me, that's really important. It is not a list of features.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a good segue, Seth. So if we want to move to the next slide, what we want to really talk about is how you tell your product story. So there really is context that goes around what this roadmap is. So as Seth mentioned, you want to make sure that you're clear on what problem you're trying to solve, and then how your product is going to do that. In this context, I guess I didn't say this at the beginning of the presentation, but I meant to say that we are really talking about the context of a digital product. There's a lot of things that are being talked about at Twin Cities Startup Week that you need in a pitch deck, and you can go much further into the market segmentation and how this product fits into your business, what the business model is, all of that. But for the purposes of this presentation, we're really going to focus on the product itself and getting good at describing it and what it does, and how that relates to the problem that you're solving in the market. So I guess one piece, it can overlap. So what makes your product unique to competition? Some of it is just thinking about your product in the context of users, business, all of it, and making sure that you can succinctly say what it is.
Yeah, I think one of the things we want to touch on is that the roadmap is the tool, right? It is the strategy, and it helps you define that problem that you're trying to solve. The idea is that you would perhaps start with a roadmap before you go into some of the deeper plans, because you want to make sure what you're making you want to begin with the heart of what you're going to make. You don't want to commit to, say, something like features or exact timelines, because you don't necessarily know exactly what you're going to make until you think through the entire process. And that's kind of the value of that roadmap, is it gives you something to think through the entire process and then tell that story. And the question that you're answering is, what exactly is this trying to do? You don't want to bog it down with lists of features. You want to get to that core of what the product actually does.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that Lucy is very passionate about this particular one. And that is who are our users, and making sure that you can talk about them in simple terms. It may be that you break them down in the roadmap specifically in separate pieces, or maybe not, but being able to describe who your users are and really what they are going to accomplish is super important. And in getting there, being able to reflect on how they're doing that work right now. So, we just added the question, how are your users currently achieving this goal? They may be doing everything manually, and you are creating a product to do it do it via automation.
Right, we've heard a lot of examples of things where there are existing products that already, for instance, if we talk about the Microsoft Office suite, how that was something that people used for a really long time, but struggled with collaboration in it. And then here Google came along with their G Suite, and they focused on, well, we don't actually care. It's not as powerful as necessarily some of the Microsoft Office stuff, but it does achieve that one thing those users were specifically trying to accomplish, which was to collaborate on a document. So it doesn't have all the bells and whistles, it doesn't have all the features, but it is that one thing that they were trying to accomplish, which was to have collaboration. So, and I guess another thing that maybe I'd throw out there that I know a lot of UXers like to throw around is the idea of a user story. And that can be the heart of it right there, which is my user is someone who wants to do something so that they may achieve something. And if you can fill in those blanks, that helps kind of understand how you can help them achieve that goal.
Mm-hmm. So through your, storytelling and defining your product, is figuring out, how will it work, and being able to describe that. So, we don't have to spend a lot of time on this, but the point is we really think there's a ton of value in showing something. So don't just tell about it, but show a picture. Or a diagram, or if it's a mobile app, like just a mock-up. It could be a scribbled mock-up, but there's something to that visual piece. And then really, I guess when I used the word workflow, I mean the different touch points, or it could be an outline of procedures, something like that. But just describing how it would work is really, once again, kind of starts getting you all the context required to be able to create a roadmap. So this topic could definitely be a presentation in and of itself. But in defining your product, it's super important in the very early stages to determine what is the minimum amount that this product can do to really make an impact. Because building out software is expensive, and there's a ton of value in iteration and feedback and the process itself. So really getting to the essence of what does it have to do? What is our simplest path? Is an art in and of itself. So
I'll be honest, I'm doing my best to hang on, but I can no longer see the presentation. So I may need to come back in.
That's not good. I'm glad we're
Can we
here.
see in the chat? Can everyone else see?
Yeah,
the
no,
presentation?
I've
Okay.
confirmed that other people can. It's just,
Okay.
it's a me problem.
Oh, okay. Got it. So finally, what is it that you need to kind of put all of this together, in this context? And, sometimes you put it into a storytelling presentation. It could be a one-sheet overview I've seen. We talk to a lot of people who are creating a product for the first time or starting a business. And oftentimes they come to us with a one-sheet overview, and it's like, this is who we are. This is what we do. This is what we're envisioning a digital platform may do. And then we will be consulting with them about what that digital platform is. Is it a mobile app? Is it a website? Is it both? All of that. So the more you can put down on paper, the better. But the fact of the matter is, it doesn't need to be a specific format. We just, whatever makes the most sense for your stage. So try not to get caught up in the format. It's just put something down.
I would say, though, it is helpful to have something put down that you can go back and look at.
Yes.
So as things evolve, as your product evolves, as your understanding of your product and your business evolves, it's helpful to go back to look at what you've discovered before. And I've oftentimes found that it's even helpful to like remember your line of thinking.
Yes.
So if you are saving things like little notes you've jotted down in a session that you attended, or just little like, those little inspirational things that you can gather into one thing that you can hang on to, and then it can be part of your pitch deck, right? Your roadmap can then go on to be parts of this other important business pieces that you need, but you've got those little bits and pieces, all those little artifacts that you can go back to reference.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's part of the reason why you should write it down. I guess
just a little,
right?
For sure. Yeah, it's super important. And the fact of the matter is you want to be sharing this documentation. The idea is that it helps you align with the people that you have to work with, whether they are your stakeholders that are, and I think we cover the term stakeholders and who those people might be. But you would be, tailoring your documentation to these different audiences, and having something for them to see is super important. They're able to articulate it or be inspired by it, etc.
Yeah, we can go into stakeholders then.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about it?
Sure. Yeah. We just covered a few different stakeholders. Investors, you may be creating an investor deck. Business partners who you're aligning on for a whole series of reasons. Mentors, really anyone who would be, sharing your story with somebody else. Mm-hmm. And then you can skip to the next slide. As the team and your product grow, there's, the sphere of people that you are communicating with also grows and gets exponential. So you want to make sure that you have these things in place. And, as Lucy was talking about, keeping things documented over time, products in general, digital products end up having documentation. And the best part about it is like, oh man, like, why did we make that decision? And you're able to go back, because it really does, as you build and build and build, it gets complex, and then you can't remember exactly why something happened, or so it's a really good refresher. And I understand that's going way down the line, but we certainly wanted to address people who are first starting and then maybe a little bit further down the line, and using roadmaps for more than just kind of an initial build.
Well, and I think too, as you have these different contexts, whether if you're building your own product, you don't really need to tell anybody else on the team what you're building, because you're just doing it. Mm-hmm. But as you get bigger, you have to explain to your team what your vision is. But the way you're explaining that to your team, and the way you're explaining that to your business stakeholders, the way you're explaining that to your investors, they may be very different types of roadmaps. They may be with different content. In the same way, you don't use the same resume to apply for every job you might be interested in. People at these different levels, they care about the world differently, and they're going to care about your product differently. And it is worthwhile thinking about their perspective as you craft that roadmap, as you show them your vision, as you paint the picture for your future. You have to pay attention to who you're going to be talking to as you craft that.
Mm-hmm. And as you craft that message, you get so much value from having other people tell your product story as well, right? You get that help from those mentors or your colleagues that are people that you're just starting to bring in, having them tell other people. You never know how you're going to network and find someone. And if you can find a way to share your story with multiple groups of people, and then just let them go out into the world and share your story, it's a very handy, helpful tool to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, and you're welcome to move us forward because it takes a while. I guess the only other thing I was going to say is, in the beginning when we talked about the definition and we talked about a roadmap being a tool, to have the right discussions, and who all those different people are, when in my experience in working with companies who are just starting up and building products, the founders themselves are the product managers and the main product leaders. I think that's almost always the case. And so they are holding all that knowledge in their head. And to get it written down is only going to help others, understand it, help scale. Like, there's so many great reasons to start just even getting in the habit of writing things down. So here we are, we're going to show some examples. I think before we show the examples themselves, we're going to show some examples of just information gathering that happens to inform a roadmap. It doesn't, they don't happen overnight. The three of us created examples that are in this presentation, and even then it's like we're trying to create something, and it just really is something that's created from context and customer input and user input and just all sorts of things that you're gathering and synthesizing to make sure that you have the right themes and the right outcomes in that document, because it's really documenting the outcomes that you want so that people are able to create the product output. So there's a lot that goes into it.
And actually, before we skip to the next one, although maybe I can, because it will take a minute. The thing, I think one of the things that we're getting to is that they're all custom. They're custom to your product. There is no exact roadmap to follow, right? Even as we sat down and tried to come up with examples, we couldn't because if there's no content, if there's no product to care about, then there's no map to make, right? Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and these are just some examples from, like, the top one is a workshop where there was like personas and touch points and evaluating value and effort. There's a lot of what is the return on our investment for these things, and what does that timing and how does that matter in our business. So there's a lot of big overarching questions that are driving the location of things. And then, like, the bottom corner is just literally all of these different inputs from users and people in the business and people talking to customer service. And it's like everybody saying, we need to do this and collecting them all and putting them into themes and deciding which themes align to the business's goals and then making a decision. So the all of this is really what it is to do product management, I should say. A piece of it anyways. So here is I think the next 3 slides, we have some just kind of visual examples of roadmaps. And in this case, this is the format, and then it really just describes an approach. In this case, a new product, and one that is going to be delivered in a beta version before it starts rolling out. So we have a vision, and make sure that the vision is there. There's an updated date on it, so someone doesn't get a hold of this thing and think it's like V1 that was created, a year ago. So in this case, the timing is, about 10 months, 1 to 2 years, and then really 3+ years in software is like, who knows what's happening in 3 years. There's probably new languages with people who will have full-time jobs doing it, and they don't even know yet. So right now it's like we're building a foundation, creating a beta. We're launching it to a limited number of people and gathering feedback. And then in the next or the next 1 to 2 years, the idea is that we're expanding, we're enhancing. Oh, now mine went away. That's not good. Let me just get I will look at my own screen here. Maybe it's size or something. Sorry, everybody. I'm gonna look at my own presentation here. I guess, can others see it?
Yeah, I've verified. That's what I'm doing on my side, is I'm just following the doc itself. So.
Oh, okay, great. So I think you guys get the gist. It is really, meant to talk about now, next, and future. I personally like roadmaps that have a later that is a very futuristic, because it's like what would inspire people that are seeing what's really exciting to think about when you're building the next version. It's like, now it's very concrete. Next is like, yes, we sort of know where we're going. We have an idea, but later is like the exciting stuff. So what are we seeing on the horizon?
Yeah, and of course, this obviously is extremely generic. You, for your own product, don't make a roadmap that looks like this. Be less generic. I'm not talking about going into hyper specificity, but if in the 3+ year horizon, if expanding into international markets, if you know that these specific markets make sense for your product, talk about that. When we say utilize a cutting edge technology, obviously you don't want to ever say just those 5 words. That doesn't make any sense to anybody. But your product, your business, your segments. These are the sorts of things that you should think about hooking into is again, how do you build that excitement? How do you paint that picture for where your industry is going? On a one sheet like this, you're going to be necessarily light on details. So this is broad strokes. This is thematically, here's what I expect to do over these next time frames. Again, just like Lucy said, writing a generic roadmap is effectively impossible, because you need to have something you're going to do. And so again, this is a bit generic, because it is sort of by definition it had to be. But you as founders or as people at the startup, you're going to know how to fill this in with the right data.
And I think if someone asks you, like, I just need the roadmap, that's it, that I would ask more questions because there is more context, and you're going to want to give them more context. Like a roadmap cannot be just a be all end all. Like, that's it. It's there needs to be more to it. So you're going to have to tell us when we can see.
I just changed the slide to this Slack roadmap.
Yeah, and this is an interesting one to me, because this is a public roadmap. There's going to be a certain time in your product's life where you might want to do this, especially as you're fielding more and more questions from users, especially as you're getting more and more popular. Slack actually relatively recently abandoned this roadmap. I think they're moving it to some other platform. But for many, many years, they had a public Trello board that looks exactly, we just took a screenshot from the Trello board. It's still live. They just haven't updated it in a little while. But this serves a few different purposes. It allows their users to know what's going on. It also, to be frank, is probably being used a little bit as a customer service tool. When people say, why don't you do this? They can say, well, here it is. It's coming in our midterm buckets. But again, this is relatively light in that you couldn't actually engineer your product based on this roadmap. This is not describing exactly, doesn't have nearly the detail that would let your team go and then build the things. But the persona this is focused on, the persona this roadmap cares about, is the general user who wants to know where this product they're using is going to go. And they want to know, is this going to solve the problems I have with Slack? Is Slack going to fix the stuff that I hate about Slack? Or do they care about things that I don't care about? And maybe that means I should reevaluate my relationship with them as a customer. Or maybe it'll give me a lot of hope that they're doing exactly what I would want them to do. So this is that outward focusing one, which I think is a really interesting concept. Seed stage startups brand new startups, you're not going to do this. You're going to do this, it's not going to give you any value. But as you get bigger and as you get a more broad user base, you need to think about not just your internal business stakeholders, but how the rest of the world views your product, and the rest of the world wants to know where you're going to go with it.
Mm-hmm. And this one also says, like, even notes the things that have been released. So they, they move it right along and show. I'd be curious to see how the time frame happens with that. My visual came back. I don't know.
Oh, good. All right, I've switched to the high altitude one now.
Okay, great.
So this is one that I mocked up together for the fictitious company Snack Maps. And again, this is something that might also serve as a public roadmap, that also might serve as a good summary inside a broader presentation for some of your business stakeholders. And this is hitting the key moments. In 2022, we're certainly going to do more than this one thing. But this is the most important thing we're going to do in 2022. I'm going to call it out to my primary stakeholders and say, this is the thing. If I had to do one thing this year, this is it. Same thing, then we call out kind of 6-month iterations. And the reason we're doing that is simply because in this case, 2022 is almost over. We don't need more buckets than that. But in 2003, we're going to get a little bit more granular, and then off into the future, who knows? Don't provide, this is something that matters to me a lot. Don't provide more detail than you can actually commit to. Don't make your roadmap look like a pretty set of empty promises. If you are beyond what you can actually commit to, don't commit. If you know the problems you want to solve, awesome, talk about that. We want to do drone delivery in 2024, but I'm not saying how we're going to do that. I'm not saying how it's going to get accomplished. It's just something we want to do. It's really easy for a roadmap to end up being an optimistic set of promises. And it's something that you do want to, of course, roadmaps are optimistic. You're not going to forecast problems. But at the same time, it has to be something that your stakeholders can find trust in. And so you want to be appropriately detailed for the time frame you're looking at. You should know what you're going to release next month. You should be able to say that really confidently. You probably shouldn't know what you're going to release at the end of 2023, and that's good. That's strong. It's to be expected. It would be frankly a little bit concerning if you did say you knew exactly what you were going to do 18 months from now. And so your roadmap should reflect that level of certainty.
Mm-hmm.
Multi-platform.
All right. So I created this one and kind of threw a bunch of little different pieces in it so that so I could talk about it. I think that in general, this is probably a little too much information in one spot, but again, I wanted to kind of talk about it for a couple of reasons. Number one, having a product that has multi-platforms, or you're dealing with a platform infrastructure that you need to focus on, a website and a mobile side, you likely will break those out. Just it's helpful for people to think of those things as different pieces. The other thing that I added to this roadmap that I think you could talk about in general terms, but can be helpful, is talking about the allocations of your focus, the difference between when you're focusing on just the maintaining your product, keeping the lights on, making sure things are just going along, between like 10 and 20%. And then the rest of the effort is on the other components. And it's going to depend on what's going on. In this case, there's the vision is to bring buyers and sellers together in a mobile marketplace. And the annual goal is to deliver services to everyone via mobile. But as you can see, there is a web application component. So this roadmap demonstrates that over 3 quarters, the idea is that we're doing more development on the mobile side and moving users over. So that is kind of the broad the broad plan in this. And in so, it's like people are focusing on rollouts. In ahead of that, we're doing back end development before front end. And I know that gets a little bit into the detail, but at a high level, depending on the scale of the product, those things may be happening in a quarter's worth of time. And the other thing that I wanted to note about this one is at the bottom, I made a note saying that it was created in November for an annual planning session. So the goal is, okay, we're going to take this roadmap and we're going to use it in our planning session. So we've showed, 3-4 different kinds. I can't remember now. And the point being is we're thinking about our audience. It's like, is our audience an investor who really cares about the high level and how it's going to make the business money? Or are we focusing in a different place? And I am really dealing with my leadership team to see what kind of allocations I have to split out my budget. So it really depends on your audience. And that's really the most important part. Is it's a tool for communicating. And if there's any main takeaway, it just is not a detailed release plan. I think that's probably the most misunderstanding. It's like I just have this magical Gantt chart that's going to help us all. And for those of us who've worked in the industry long enough, my goodness, they change. So
one thing I want to just again go back to referencing the previous one we showed compared to this one is in that previous slide, we don't have the page back, but in that previous slide, that was looking at 3 full years, and it had, again, levels of detail appropriate to a 3-year roadmap. Mm-hmm. This is looking at 3 quarters, and so, yeah, it's much more detailed because you have enough vision to do this. You have clarity of vision to say, I can say this with pretty high certainty that this definitely is what I'm going to do. Mm-hmm. And that's just to refresh what I had said before. This is a great example of how, as you focus in on your time scale, you can and should add more detail to what you're committing to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that kind of like sight line is really important. Is like how far out you're looking. So
I cut ahead because you had a really great transition to it. So what shouldn't be in a roadmap, right?
Yes.
And Seth, you've talked about how lists of features aren't helpful, exact timelines and dates. You don't want to overcommit. And same with project completion. You don't know what your product is going to look like in 3 years. Mm-hmm. And so you don't need to promise that it will be drone delivery of food. You cannot promise that.
And I want to clarify, right? Features do have a place in roadmaps. This first bullet does not say never talk about your features. That's not the point. But again, it's about that context. Next week, next month, I'm going to release feature X. Yeah, put that in your roadmap. Next year, don't. Talk about the value you're going to achieve. Talk about the people whose needs you're going to meet. I've said this 3 times in a row, so I won't say it again, but that's what I'm saying. Yeah, go ahead. Put the features that you absolutely can commit to, go ahead. But that's a pretty small number of features, and don't get greedy there. Keep it thin.
Mm-hmm. I think the only thing I would add that and you can advance because I'm trying to remember are we right at the end?
Okay. So do we need to run that?
Oh, we think the answer is yes. The one thing I wanted to add is how putting things on the future piece of your roadmap, or even in the next, the next column, is that those people that you've assembled to do the creative work are really interested on where things are going. Like that, like knowing the vision and where we're going, you could possibly have inspired an engineer to say like, I can make that drone happen. Mm-hmm. I saw that and I'm going to do that sooner. So it also can be a tool of motivation and just like excitement for the team that does the work for you.
Yeah, 100%.
And
As soon as you've got more than a team of one.
Yeah.
People do better work. Designers and developers both do much better work if they know where in the workflow they sit, what comes before them, what comes after them. Those are really smart resources, and let them be smart. Hire smart people and then let them be smart for you. And one of the ways you do that is by letting them know the context of their work.
We're almost there, almost to questions. And I think that we've said this. We agree. We think there needs to be a roadmap. It doesn't have to be formal, but we've given plenty of examples that, it's a table. It is a line with some time frames on it. It is, and all in all, it has to be adjusted. It's a living document. It evolves. Which is really, the cool part about products.
So here we are.
All right. Well, we do certainly have time. We have plenty of time here for questions, comments, etc. At the moment, I see nothing in the chat, which is fine too. If there's no questions, so be it. But this is certainly your time to bring up anything that you want to discuss, questions you have, things that you thought we would talk about, but we didn't. Any of the above.
Yeah.
And we can give some people some time to type. And while we do that, we did have some links that we thought would be helpful. Some of the sources of inspiration for this presentation, or things that we found after we wrote it and said, hey, that sounds a lot like ours. So I'm going to do a little link dump here in the chat that we found. It tends to have some examples that are helpful and just some inspiration here. So I'll share that in the chat with everyone. Wow, that is a pile of links with no format. So
Lucy.
I don't think I can edit it. So we're just gonna
making the designer very uncomfortable.
All right, we do have a question coming in from Brenda here. It says, thank you for your insight. Question is, how do you know when to initially share your roadmap with possible investors? Geri, you've done this most recently, I think, so I'd let you speak to it. I have my own opinions, but Geri?
Yeah. Well, I guess the first time I shared an official roadmap, and I don't know that there was one before. We had been working on things for several years, so it was like a different funding raise, but it was during a funding raise. So I would say that that's my experience. Now, that said, I guess I can't think of a reason why you wouldn't share a roadmap at a specific stage. It's really, to me, having a document that tells your product story, that has your vision and what you want your product to do, it's just so incredibly valuable to articulating what you're doing. To me, it just makes you look like you've really thought through things. It's not, it's not set in stone. It's just really meant to package it up for someone, I guess.
No, I agree with that. I think that you should always have an artifact, whether you want to call this artifact a formal roadmap or not. It really doesn't matter that much. Even if you're, kind of a one-man band sort of startup, you should have an artifact that says, here's my goals, here's what I want to do, here's what I want to get to. And again, that can be, when you're just sharing it with yourself, that can be as aspirational as you want, and good luck to you. Once you start sharing it out, especially with people like investors, I said I wouldn't say this again, but it's too late. I'm going to do it. You got to make sure, the only thing you have to do is you have to make sure that you're committing to something that you are comfortable committing to. If you give an investor a list of things that you're about to achieve and they invest in you on the back of that document, you would absolutely better be able to back that up. or at least to within a reasonable tolerance. And so what that means is if someone wants to know what you're going to do for the next little bit, you can probably be pretty honest and say, this is exactly what I'm going to do next. If someone wants to know your 5-year plan, give them a 5-year plan. But just be careful what you're promising in that. I think that if you bring your vision, again, call it a roadmap or not, if you bring your vision to a meeting with an investor, it is going to show your level of commitment. It is going to show that you've thought about, getting, not just like extending your runway and hoping it doesn't run out before you get users. You've thought about what happens once you've succeeded. You thought about what happens next and how your product is going to grow and evolve. So I think, Brenda, to answer your question, I think that you should always have something like this in your back pocket. And then as you're meeting with investors, they're going to want to know your vision, and then you can bring that out and show them.
And I think related, one of the biggest values of a roadmap is it proves that you can make your idea a reality, right? It grounds your idea. It proves that you have thought through some of the details, maybe not all of them. It's no longer some impossible goal to achieve. You started to figure out the strategy and those steps, and that gives you something tangible to show them. And it's not simply an idea, it's becoming a reality. And that roadmap is that physical proof of that reality.
Sure. We do have a second question that's in from Emma. It says, can you tell us about any projects that you were passionate about that you thought inspired your team? And are there any fun facts you can share? It's a really interesting question. I think, to me, to speak relatively generically, I think the way I've been able to help inspire teams, but also the way I've been inspired as part of a team, is being able to see whatever you're making, whatever you're doing, start to take off. And that's usually, now we're differing, I think, a little bit from roadmaps, but it's getting into more incremental work, right? It's great to plan big, but you have to kind of act small, so to speak. Like the way to inspire your team is to show them that the work they're doing is having actual impact. If you're pre-users, this is different. If you're post-users, it's really easy. If you've got users, then release features. See if your users like them. Keep doing that. If you're pre-users, that's a little bit different, right? You're not going to have that same impact right away because you haven't launched. But the best way I can say to inspire your team is to show them that the work they're doing is being incorporated into your product and being used. And show them, the other thing is, like I said about context, is your team doesn't just want to know what's coming next, but they want to know why it's coming next. And that's important too. And if you say, if you do this, you're going to, save people half of their costs on XYZ, or if you're going to, double response times, or I guess that's the wrong, half response times, whatever. Tie that to the metrics that you're trying to move. If you're a believer in OKRs, tie it to your OKRs. If you're not, you tie it to some metric. Tie it to something that is going to show that your team is doing real work.
Yeah, I think that's really great to say. Inspire your team by showing them actual feedback and how that translates to what you're doing, because what you build matters. And knowing, and I guess, I don't know that I'm answering the question specifically, but I really believe in just empowering professionals to do what they're awesome at, which is like designers do really well when they're doing amazing design work and working with engineers who are doing their piece. And, I think it's product's job and producers' jobs and technical product managers and all that jazz. It's their job to really help inspire and like bring the information to people doing the work so that they have all that context, they understand, and there's a a bridge. There's like an understanding between the people doing the work and the people leading and running the business, and those have to obviously coexist and work together. And they're not always doing that. There's a reason there's a job that people help bridge that gap.
Well,
So
and to tie it more directly to this conversation, this presentation, your roadmap it's a sales doc in many ways. It is painting that vision for how you're going to change the world, or at least change your part of the world. And that can and should be an inspiring artifact for your team to see what they're going to do. And so that's a big part of it. I'm sorry, Emma, you asked for fun facts, and I love the question. But off the top of my head, I can't give you any interesting fun facts. But I'll do my best to follow up. That seems to be it for questions for this session. So I really appreciate everybody spending the time with us here this afternoon.
Yeah. Feel free. We didn't put our contact on here, but I'm sure you can find us on LinkedIn. You can, send us a message on the within Hopin. We'd be happy to connect or answer questions directly too. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Enjoy the rest of the week here. Hope you see some other fantastic seminars and sessions. And thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.